Hello there, welcome. If you are new here, I am Molly, also known as LittleMoTAC, and today we are looking at the accessibility within Assassin's Creed Shadows. Ubisoft very kindly gave me a code so I could check out the game early, and I'm so excited because I love the Assassin's Creed games. And it also gave me a chance to look at the accessibility of the game and basically be able to tell you guys whether it is worth buying or not, depending on whether it is accessible to you. Alert! Before we go any further, I want to do a mild spoiler warning for this video. I do not talk about any specifics of the story or of the game or anything in it, but to talk about the accessibility options, I do have to sort of hint at the game and what's in it. So I would advise, if you're planning to go into the game with no knowledge at all, maybe skip this video until afterwards, just because I sort of hint at things. I don't go into specifics, but I sort of hint. And so I didn't want to spoil anyone's fun, just in case you wanted to go in with no knowledge of anything at all. And now we shall proceed. When you open up the game for the first time, you immediately get an accessibility menu, which we love, because some people may not even be able to get through the first cutscene or the first menu without setting up accessibility for them first. When the accessibility menu opens, you immediately get text-to-speech narration telling you how to turn on the menu/screen narration if you need it. You're presented with options for captions, which you get 3 different options of, which are off, normal, or full. Normal is just captions for people speaking, and then full includes on-screen directional indicators depending on where sounds and sound effects and speakers are coming from, but also includes emotions of the person speaking, which is really great, not just for those in the deaf or hard of hearing community, but also for those of us in the autistic community. We don't have to pick up on subtle social cues. It is right there for us, intended in the way that the writers meant it. You can also adjust the UI size in this menu, which there are 3 options, but I personally would like a slider. I just think sliders as opposed to presets make everything really easy and everyone can customize their screen as they want. There are presets to change certain colors within the game UI, but they are very specific presets. I would personally like it if they could be customized. They are set up for various types of color blindness, however, this only seems to be applied to the UI and nothing else in the game. And because it is just the UI, it means that you cannot change any of the color actually within the gameplay itself, in like the scenery or the characters. There is a toggle for simplified control options. However, it's sort of difficult to understand what this is referring to in terms of the controls until you're actually playing the game, but it is very handy to have it up front and ready to go, and then when you've started the game and you get used to your gameplay and how you want to play the game and what is accessible to you, you can then go in and tweak it yourself within the options menu. Also within this menu, there is options to turn off certain sensitive content, which includes blood and dismemberment. You can turn these off independently within the actual game options menu, but for this toggle it is just both on or off. There's also a motion reduction toggle, which again, there are options within that you can go into and change within the options menu within the game, but for this is just an on-off toggle which affects screen shape, turns off motion blur, and changes the field of view. After setting up within this menu, you then get taken to the Animus, which is basically the new hub for all things Assassin's Creed. So it's got all the new games featured on there, not the older ones, but I don't know if they're coming soon, but it's got all the newer games featured on there, and you basically select which game you want to play and you head on in. When you head on into the game, you get presented with more options such as difficulty level from story, forgiving, normal, and expert, depending on how you want to play. There's also canon mode, which will turn off some dialogue options, and something they've included called immersive mode. And immersive mode seems to just mean characters will talk in their native language throughout the game, and to know what they're saying, you read the subtitles. However, I had this turned off because for me, I need both speaking and subtitles to take in any information. And it seems to be, even with this turned off, at the beginning of the game in the first cutscene, some of the characters were speaking Portuguese, so the only way I knew what they were saying was by reading subtitles. However, if I was unable to read the subtitles, I would be missing out on that part of the story. Like, I just would not know what these people were saying or discussing. Even though I've got immersive mode turned off and I've got it set to English, they're still speaking in Portuguese, so I still would not know what they were saying, and I'd just miss out on that chunk of the opening dialogue, which is really annoying. And I went back and I tried to fiddle and be like, maybe it's something I've done wrong, but it doesn't seem to be, because for the rest of the game, everybody spoke in English, so it was just for this opening part, I guess, to get you immersed, but the whole point was I had immersive mode turned off so that I could play the game in the way I wanted to. So that kind of sucked, because if you cannot read the subtitles or you cannot read at the speed at which these people are speaking, you will have no idea what they are saying. And it just seems really odd that that wasn't thought of. But like, it seems like a really big thing to miss, which is why I kept assuming that I'd made the mistake in setting it up, but I hadn't. Like, I'd had all the options correctly. I checked them about 5-6 times, So that was really odd and just quite a big thing to overlook. On a more positive note, within this opening scene, you get introduced to conversation logs, which are incredible. We love logs, we love journals, we love being able to look back at transcripts. It is so good. So if you missed anything, or you're not sure what they're talking about, or you looked away for a second, or you couldn't quite process the information properly and want to make a more informed decision within your dialogue options, you can just go back and read it, which is amazing. We love stuff like that. Once you actually get into the gameplay, there's this really nice interactive tutorial that doesn't even treat it like a tutorial. It's really nice. You basically go straight into your first fight, and slowly it ramps up with the combat and the powers you have and how to block and how to parry. And it sort of builds up throughout these first few fights, which is really good. It doesn't give you too much information too quickly, and it also means like once you've done the first bit of fighting, if you want to go back and customize any options you can, or remap any controls you can, and you just sort of slowly build on your skills from there, which I love when games do that. I really like learning through action. And within the game, there is an even larger array of options within the options menu. There is no dedicated accessibility menu within Assassin's Creed Shadows. Everything is under headers that make sense, but there is no dedicated accessibility header. So it does mean you sort of have to shuffle through them to work out which options there are. And I know like this approach has like pros and cons, because like for instance, separate accessibility menus sometimes mean that people can't find what they need if they class it as an option under a different accessibility header than the devs would. For instance, something may be cognitive accessibility to one person but not to another. However, because there is no dedicated accessibility menu, it does mean to find out what options there are for you, you have to go through every single menu and every single option to find out what there is. So as far as it stands, under the video display menu, you can change your field of view, which is part of the motion reduction toggle that was in the startup menu. And so here you can customize it on its own. And so the motion reduction toggle defaults it to 90%, and then you can play around with that. It's on a sliding scale, so you can do whatever you want. Motion blur toggles are also in this menu, which are really great for anyone that struggles with motion sickness or migraines. And then under controls, you have separate menus for controller and also mouse and keyboard. There is controller remapping and customization for both controller and mouse and keyboard. For mouse and keyboard, you can set up various controls to either be press, hold, or toggle depending on what you need. And this press, hold, or toggle option is available for both auto movement and walking, and also sprinting, which is great for anyone like me that struggles to hold down keys for extended periods of time. You can simply toggle on sprint or walking to require less physical exertion. To enable the auto movement, they are in different places for the mouse and keyboard setup versus controller. For mouse and keyboard, it is under control customization, and under here you can assign a specific button to toggle auto movement on and off. Whereas for controller movement, it is not in the control customization, but is just its own option in the controller menu. However, you cannot do this for all controls. So for actions like activating eagle vision, you do have to hold them down, and there doesn't seem to be a way to turn this off. And I know this is probably to avoid triggering other actions or accidentally hitting these keys, but I just feel like this should be left up to the individual player, especially for an action like eagle vision, which within Assassin's Creed, you know you're going to use a lot. Amazingly, you can unassign controls, which is super handy, especially if you're using a third-party controller like the PlayStation Access controller, because this is a problem I often run into when trying to use it with games, is that there are too many controls needed in the game that I won't use, and I can't map them to the controller because there's not enough buttons, or the buttons would end up being set up in a way that wasn't optimal for me. So I love when games let you unassign actions you will not use. Within this menu, you can also change the walking speed of your character, which is great if you need slower, more intentional movement of your character, or even faster movement to require less button holding, or even just for myself, I am very impatient. Camera and aiming sensitivity options are also in this menu, which are obviously very uncommon in games, but I personally think they come under accessibility as well as just general gameplay. Under the general audio menu, you can change the frequency of how often music plays when you're off exploring, which is great if you get over or understimulated during exploration periods in games. And there's also a dynamic range option for sounds, which allows you to adjust the volume contrast between sounds. So the higher the dynamic range, louder sounds would be louder and quieter sounds would be quieter, if that makes sense, which is really good just to have that contrast option. There's also a focus mix option which you can toggle on and off, which means that important gain sounds will be amplified louder than other sounds, which means it will really draw your attention, which is great if you don't notice subtleties in sound differences. Like for instance, for myself, I really struggle to process auditory information unless it's super pronounced and basically yelling at me. Under the interface menu, you can change a bunch of options for the UI. Once again, as in the startup menu, you can go through the colorblind presets for the UI. You can change on-screen text and icon sizes. However, for all three of these things, you only have a few options to toggle between. So there isn't like that much customization. With text size, for instance, I always wish games had a slider so players can sort of customize the size precisely for themselves. And even like the large text size in this game, like for me, is not that large. There are also several heads-up display presets to scroll through, so you can choose how much information you want to be displayed on the screen at any one time, which is really handy if you need more information, but also really handy if you struggle to process a lot of information at once. So you can go in and customize your heads-up display precisely for the information you want to know. There are also options to customize how your heads-up display appears. So you can change its opacity on a sliding scale. You can also add a background if you want more contrast between the HUD and the actual gameplay. Then we come to the gameplay menu, where we have options for aim assist, which is available in varying degrees to none to complete aim assist, and also for how you want quick time events executed, from the default way to them auto-completing. There is also an option, which I love, that you can toggle on and off, which will allow you to loot an entire area with the click of a button, which means you won't have to individually interact with each item or body to pick it up, which is really great for people with fatigue or disabilities that affect mobility. Sometimes those small things can really make all the difference. Along the same lines, there are also options for how to use melee in combat. You can choose between default, combo, and combo posture. The combo option allows you to do a combo melee attack with just one button rather than multiple. In this menu, there are also camera options such as automatic camera lock-on, which during combat will cause your camera to lock onto your nearest enemy rather than you selecting yourself. So for instance, within my gameplay, I use my middle mouse button to lock onto an enemy. If you have this turned on, it will do it for you. There is also a camera follow option, which will force the camera to lock onto your character and follow whichever direction they're facing in. And the final accessibility option, for those who have content preferences or need content accessibility, you can toggle both dismemberment and blood on or off. These kind of content options and adjustments are something that we're seeing increasingly in games, and I think it's really amazing, so thank you, Ubisoft, for including that. Overall, my opinions of the accessibility of the game is that it's great for those with disabilities that will affect their energy or their mobility, with the amount of customization in that area, as far as like customizing controls, auto movement, all that kind of stuff. And there's some great options for deaf or hard of hearing players with sound and emotion indicators within captions, and the ways you can customize the volume of various game elements. However, I think this game really does let down the blind and low vision players. From the outset of the game, there seems to be no way to have the first bit of audio dialogue in English. So if you are unable to read the subtitles for any reason, you simply wouldn't know what's going on, and you lose out on that early bit of dialogue and that early bit of story. Similarly, for colorblind players, although there are presets, these seem to only apply to the UI, and you can't actually customize any of the colors within the game, and also you cannot customize the colors of the UI yourself. There's also no high contrast mode, so it really feels like the focus of the accessibility for the game was on cognitive and mobility accessibility, whether that was intentional or not. But with the focus Ubisoft have been putting on the new Animus menu and system they're setting up for Assassin's Creed, and talking about constant updates and it being online, I'm really hoping accessibility improvements might come along with this. Let me know if you're thinking about getting the game. I personally have played about an hour, 2 hours so far, and I'm really enjoying it. It's a good game. So let me know what you think down below, and feel free to like follow me on socials, subscribe here and like the video if you liked it. And yeah, I hope you have a wonderful day. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you next time.